Aho, Mitakuye, I say hello, all my relations. How y'all doing? My name is the Lucky Coyote, and today we are going to be reading some more Brothers Grimm. So I hope y'all enjoy that. Today we're going to be starting off with the little brother and sister. But to start off, doing really well on the house, though the house I'm building, helping build actually. So the first floor is pretty much done. Now we got to move on to the second floor, since the basement I believe is done, but I'm not certain because I wasn't the one down there. But the house is all papered, stuff like that. And next week we should be putting on the second floor as well as the trusses, so that'll be fun. It's always fun climbing around on the roof. All right, so let's get to her. Gotta put up the title real quick. Here we are. The Little Brother and Sister by the Brothers Grimm. There was once a little brother who took his sister by the hand and said, "Since our own dear mother's death, we have not had one happy hour. Our stepmother beats us every day, and, if we come near her, kicks us away with her foot. Our food is the hard crusts of bread which are left, and even the dog under the table fares better than we, for he often gets a nice morsel. Come, let us wander forth into the wide world." So the whole day long they traveled over meadows, fields, and stones, and when it rained, the sister said, "It is heaven crying with our hearts." By evening they came to a large forest, and were so wearied with grief, hunger, and their long walk, that they laid themselves down in a hollow tree, and went to sleep. When they awoke the next morning, the sun had already risen high in the heavens, and it shone quite hot into the tree, so that the little boy said to his sister, "I am so thirsty. If I knew where there was a brook, I would go and drink. Ah, I think I hear one running." And so saying, he got up, and, taking his sister's hand, they went in search of the brook. The wicked stepmother, however, was a witch, and had remarked the departure of the two children, and sneaking after them secretly, as is the habit of witches, she had bewitched all the springs in the forest. Presently they found a brook which ran trippingly over the pebbles, and the brother would have drunk out of it, but the sister heard how it said as it ran along, "Who drinks of me will become a tiger." So the sister exclaimed, "I pray you, brother, drink not, or you will become a tiger and tear me to pieces." So the brother did not drink, although his thirst was so great, and he said, "I will wait till the next brook." As they came to a second, the sister heard it say, "Who drinks of me becomes a wolf." The sister ran up crying, "Brother, do not, pray, do not drink, or you will become a wolf and eat me up." Then the brother did not drink, saying, I will wait until we come to the next spring, but then I must drink. You must say what you will, my thirst is much too great. Just as they reached the third brook, the sister heard the voice saying, Who drinks of me will become a fawn. Who drinks of me will become a fawn. So the sister said, Oh, my brother, do not drink, or you'll be changed into a fawn and run away from me. But he had already kneeled down and drunk of the water, and as the first drops passed his lips, his form became that of a fawn. At first the sister cried over her little changed brother, and he wept too, and knelt by her very sorrowful. But at last the maiden said, Be still, dear little fawn, and I will never forsake you. And undoing her golden garter, she put it round his neck, and weaving rushes, made a wide white girdle to lead him with. This she tied to him, and, taking the other end in her hand, she led him away, and they traveled deeper and deeper into the forest. After they had walked a long distance, they came to a little hut, and the maiden, peeping in, found it empty, and thought, Here we can stay and dwell. Then she looked for leaves and moss to make a soft couch for the fawn, and every morning she went out and collected roots and berries and nuts for herself, and tender grass for the fawn, which he ate out of her hand, and played happily around her. In the evening, when the sister was tired and had said her prayers, she laid her head upon the back of the fawn, which served for a pillow, on which she slept soundly. Had the brother regained his own proper form, their life would have been happy indeed. Do it. Turn into a wolf. Thus they dwelt in this wilderness, and some time had elapsed when it happened that the king of the country held a great hunt in the forest, and now resounded through the trees the blowing of horns, the barking of dogs, and the lusty cries of the hunters, so that the little fawn heard them, and wanted very much to join. Ah, he said to his sister, let me go on the hunt. I cannot restrain myself any longer. And he begged so hard that at last she consented. But, she said to him, return again in the evening, for I shall shut my door against the wild huntsman, and that I may know you, do you knock and say, Sister, let me in. And if you do not speak, I shall not open the door. As soon as she had said this, the little fawn sprang off, quite glad and merry in the fresh breeze. The king and his huntsmen perceived the beautiful animal and pursued him, but they could not catch him. And when they thought they had him for certain, he sprang away over the bushes and got out of sight. Just as it was getting dark, he ran up to the hut and, knocking, said, Sister mine, let me in. Then she undid the little door, and he went in, and rested all night long upon his soft couch. The next morning the hunt was commenced again, and soon the little fawn heard the horns and the tally-ho of the sportsmen he could not rest, and said, Sister, dear, open the door, I must be off. The sister opened it, saying, Return at evening, mind, and say the words as before. When the king and his huntsmen saw again the fawn with the golden necklace, they followed him close, but he was too nimble and quick for them. The whole day long they kept up with him, but towards evening the huntsman made a circle round him, and one wounded him slightly in the foot behind, so that he could only run slowly. Then one of them slipped after him to the little hut, and heard him say, "Sister, dear, open the door," and saw that the door was opened and immediately shut behind him. The huntsman, having observed all this, went and told the king what he had seen and heard. And he said, "On the morrow I will once more pursue him." The sister, however, was terribly frightened when she saw her fawn was wounded, and washing off the blood, she put herbs on the foot, and said, "Go and rest upon your bed, dear fawn, that the wound may heal." It was so slight that the next morning he felt nothing of it, and when he heard the hunting cries outside, he exclaimed, "I cannot stop away. I must be there, and none shall catch me so easily again." The sister wept very much, and told him, "Soon they will kill you, and I shall be here all alone in this forest, forsaken by all the world. I cannot let you go." "I shall die here in vexation," answered the fawn, "if you do not, for when I hear the horn, I think I shall jump out of my shoes." The sister, finding she could not prevent him, opened the door with a heavy heart, and the fawn jumped out, quite delighted, into the forest. As soon as the king perceived him, he said to his huntsman, "Follow him all day long till the evening, but let no one do him an injury." When the sun had set, the king asked his huntsman to show him the hut, and as they came to it, he knocked on the door and said, "Let me in, dear sister." Then the door was opened, and, stepping in, the king saw a maiden more beautiful than he had ever before seen. She was frightened when she saw, not her fawn, but a man step in, who had a golden crown upon his head. But the king, looking at her with a friendly glance, reached her his hand, saying, "Will you go with me to my castle and be my dear wife?" "Oh, yes," replied the maiden, "but the fawn must go too. Him I will never forsake." The king replied, "He shall remain with you as long as you live, and shall want for nothing." In the meantime, the fawn had come in, and the sister, binding the girdle to him, again took it in her hand and led him away with her out of the hut. The king took the beautiful maiden upon his horse and rode to his castle, where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, and she became queen, and they lived together a long time, while the fawn was taken care of and lived well, playing about the castle garden. The wicked stepmother, however, on whose account the children had wandered forth into the world, did not think but that the sister had been torn in pieces by the wild beasts, and the little brother hunted to death in his fawn shape by the hunters. As soon as she heard how happy they had become, and how everything prospered with them, envy and jealousy were aroused in her heart, and left her no peace, and she was always thinking in what way she could work misfortune to them. Her own daughter, who was as ugly as night, and had but one eye, for which she was continually reproached, said, "The luck of being a queen has never yet happened to me."
"Be quiet now,"
said the old woman,
"and make yourself centered. When the time comes, I shall be at your hand."
As soon, then, as the time came when the queen brought into the world a beautiful little boy, which happened when the king was out hunting, the old witch took the form of a chambermaid and got into the room where the queen was lying, and said to her,
"The bath is ready, which will restore you and give you fresh strength. Be quick before it gets cold."
Her daughter being at hand, they carried the weak queen between them into the room and laid her in the bath, and then, shutting the door, they ran off. But first they had made up an immense fire in the stove, which must soon suffocate the young queen. When this was done, the old woman took her daughter, and, putting a cap on her, laid her in the bed in the queen's place. She gave her, too, the form and appearance of the real queen, as far as she could, but she could not restore the lost eye, and, so that the king might not notice it, she turned upon that side where there was no eye. When he came home at evening and heard that a son was born to him, he was much delighted, and prepared to go to his wife's bedside to see how she did. So the old woman called out in a great hurry,
"For your life, do not undraw the curtains. The queen must not yet see the light, and must be kept quiet."
So the king went away, and did not discover that a false queen was laid in the bed. When midnight came, and everyone was asleep, the nurse, who sat by herself wide awake near the cradle in the nursery, saw the door open and the true queen come in. She took the child in her arms and rocked it a while, and then, shaking up its pillow, laid it down in its cradle and covered it over again. She did not forget the fawn either, but, going to the corner where he was, stroked his back, and then went silently out at the door. The nurse asked in the morning of the guards if anyone had passed into the castle during the night, but they answered, "No, we have seen nobody." For many nights afterwards she came constantly and never spoke a word, and the nurse saw her always, but she would not trust herself to speak about it to anyone. When some time had passed away, the queen one night began to speak, and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Twice more will I come, but never again." The nurse made no reply, but when she had disappeared, went to the king and told him all. The king exclaimed, "O heavens, what does this mean? The next night I will watch myself by the child." In the evening he went up into the nursery, and about midnight the queen appeared and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Once more will I come, but never again." And she nursed the child, and as she was used to do, and then disappeared. The king dared not speak, but he watched the following night, and this time she said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? This time will I come, but never again." At these words the king could hold back no longer, but sprang up and said, "You can be no other than my dear wife." Then she answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife." And at that moment her life was restored by God's mercy, and she was again as beautiful and charming as ever. She told the king the fraud which the witch and her daughter had practiced upon him, and he had them both tried and sentence pronounced against them. The daughter was taken into the forest, where the wild beasts tore her in pieces, but the old witch was led to the fire and miserably burnt. And as soon as she was reduced to ashes, the little fawn was unbewitched, and received again his human form, and the brother and sister lived happily together to the end of their days. Thus ends The Little Brother and Sister. The next tale is The Three Little Men in the Wood. There we are. That's better. They were coming, but not off camera. All right. This guy likes his familial relationships. I mean, this is the Brothers Grimm. I mean, they just collected these stories from peasants. We're all like, yeah, the only way we can really raise our station is to... No, not that. The only way we can really raise our station is to, like, have some sort of noble recognize us for being exceedingly beautiful. Or, you know, become a... As a... male just perform some sort of massive daring deed for some princess and you get raised to a noble, or perform some sort of trick, I guess. So they were all about that. No, the nobility like to keep their bloodlines pure. So, that. The Three Little Men in the Wood. Once upon a time there lived a man whose wife had died, and a woman also who had lost her husband. And this man and this woman had each a daughter. These two maidens were friendly with each other, and used to walk together. And one day they came by the widow's house. Then the widow said to the man's daughter, "Do you hear? Tell your father I wish to marry him, and you shall every morning wash in milk and drink wine, but my daughter shall wash in water and drink water." So the girl went home and told her father what the woman had said, and he replied, "What shall I do? Marriage is a comfort, but it is also a torment." At last he could form no conclusion. He drew off his boot and said, "Take this boot, which has a hole in the sole, and go with it out of doors and hang it on the great nail, and then pour water into it. If it holds the water, I will again take a wife. But if it runs through, I will not have her." The girl did as he bid her, but the water drew the hole together, and the boot became full to overflowing. So she told her father how it had happened, and he, getting up, saw it was quite true, and going to the window, he settled the matter, and the wedding was celebrated. Wash in milk? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's supposedly good for the skin. And also, you know, it's a sign of opulence in order to wash in milk. The next morning, when the two girls arose, milk to wash in and wine to drink were set for the man's daughter, but only water, both for washing and drinking, for the woman's daughter. The second morning, water for washing and drinking stood before the man's daughter and the woman's, and on the third morning, water to wash in and water to drink were set before the man's daughter, and milk to wash in and wine to drink before the woman's daughter. And so it continued. Soon the woman had a deadly hatred of her stepdaughter, and knew not how to behave badly enough to her. From day to day she was envious too, because her stepdaughter was beautiful and lovely, and her own daughter was ugly and hateful. Once, in the winter time, when water had frozen as hard as a stone, and hill and valley were covered with snow, the woman made a cloak of paper, and called the maiden to her, and said, "Put on this cloak, and go away into the wood, and to fetch me a little basketful of strawberries, for I have a wish for some." "Mercy on us," said the maiden. "In winter there are no strawberries growing. The ground is frozen, and the snow, too, has covered up everything. And why must I go in that paper cloak? It is too cold out of doors, that it freezes one's breath even, and the wind will blow it off, and the thorns will tear it from my body." "Will you dare to contradict me?" said the stepmother. "Make haste off, and let me not see you again until you have found me a basket of strawberries." Then she gave her a small piece of dry bread, saying, "On that you must subsist the whole day." But she thought, "Out of doors she will be frozen and starved, so that my eyes will never see her again." So the girl did as she was told, and put on the paper cloak, and went away with the basket. Far and near there was nothing but snow, and not a green blade was to be seen. When she came to the forest, she discovered a little cottage, out of which 3 little dwarfs were peeping. The girl wished them good morning, and knocked gently at the door. They called her in, and, entering the room, she sat down on a bench by the fire to warm herself and eat her breakfast. The dwarfs called out, "Give us some of it." "Willingly," she replied, and dividing her bread in 2, she gave them half. They asked, "What do you do here in the forest, in winter time, in this thin cloak?" "Ah," she answered, "I must seek a basketful of strawberries, and I dare not return home until I can take them with me." When she had eaten her bread, they gave her a broom, saying, "Sweep away the snow with this from the back door." But when she was gone out of doors, the 3 dwarfs said to one another, "What shall we give her, besides, because she is so gentle and good, and has shared her bread with us?" Then said the first, "I grant to her that she shall become more beautiful every day." The second said, "I grant that a piece of gold shall fall out of her mouth for every word she speaks." The third said, "I grant that the king shall come and make her his bride." Meanwhile, the girl had done as the dwarfs had bidden her, and had swept away snow from behind the house. And what do you think she found there? Actually ripe strawberries, which came quite red and sweet up under the tender snow. So, filling her basket in great glee, she thanked the little men, and gave them each her hand, and then ran home to take her stepmother what she wished for. As she went in and said, "Good evening," a piece of gold fell from her mouth. Thereupon she related what had happened to her in the forest, but at every word she spoke, a piece of gold fell, so that the whole floor was covered. "Just see her arrogance," said the stepsister, "to throw away money in that way." But in her heart she was jealous, and wished to go into the forest too, to seek strawberries. Her mother said, "No, my dear daughter, it is too cold. You will be frozen." But as her girl let her have no peace, she at last consented, and made her a beautiful fur cloak to put on. She also gave her buttered bread and cooked meat to eat on the way. The girl went into the forest and came straight to the little cottage. The three dwarves were peeping out again, but she did not greet them, and, stumbling on without looking at them or speaking, she entered the room, and, seating herself by the fire, began to eat the bread and butter and meat. "Give us some of that," exclaimed the dwarves, but she answered, "I have not got enough for myself, so how can I give you any away?" When she had finished, they said, "You have a broom there. Go and sweep the back door clean." "Oh, sweep it yourself," she replied. "I am not your servant." When she saw that they would not give her anything, she went out at the door, and the three dwarves said to each other, "What shall we give her? She is so ill-behaved, and has such a bad and envious disposition, that nobody can wish well to her." The first said, "I shall grant she becomes more ugly every day." The second said, "I shall grant that every word she speaks, a toad shall spring out of her mouth." The third said, "I grant that she shall die a miserable death." Meanwhile, the girl had been looking for strawberries out of doors, but as she could find none, she went home very peevish. When she opened her mouth to tell her mother what had happened to her in the forest, a toad jumped out of her mouth at each word, so that everyone fled away from her in horror. The stepmother was now still more vexed, and was always thinking how she could do the most harm to the husband's daughter, whom every day became more beautiful. At last she took a kettle, set it on the fire, and boiled a net therein. When it was sodden, she hung it on the shoulder of the poor girl, and gave her an axe, that she might go upon the frozen pond and cut a hole in the ice to drag the net. She obeyed, and went away and cut an ice hole, and while she was cutting, an elegant carriage came by, in which the king sat. The carriage stopped, and the king asked, "My child, who are you, and what do you do here?" "I am a poor girl, and am dragging a net," said she. Then the king pitied her, and saw how beautiful she was, and said, "Will you go with me?" "Yes, indeed, with all my heart," she replied, for she was glad to get out of sight of her mother and sister. Ow, harsh. Yeah, pretty harsh. Mystical creatures are very spiteful. She was handed into the carriage and driven away with the king, and as soon as they arrived at his castle, the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, as the dwarves had granted to the maiden. After a year, the young queen bore a son, and when the stepmother heard of her great good fortune, she came to the castle with her daughter, and behaved as if she had come on a visit. But one day, when the king had gone out, and no one was present, this bad woman seized the queen by the head, and her daughter caught hold of her feet, and, raising her out of bed, they threw her out of the window into the river which ran past. Then, lying her ugly daughter on the bed, the old woman covered her up, even over her head, and when the king came back, he wished to speak to his wife, but the old woman exclaimed, "Softly, softly, do not go near her. She is lying in a beautiful sleep, and must be kept quiet today." The king, not thinking of any evil design, came again the next morning, the first thing, and when he spoke to his wife, and she answered, a toad sprang out of her mouth at every word, as before a piece of gold had done. So he asked what had happened, and the old woman said,
That is produced by her weakness. She will soon lose it again.
But in the night the kitchen boy saw a duck swimming through the brook, and the duck said,
King, king, what are you doing? Are you sleeping, or are you waking?
And as he gave no answer, the duck said,
What are my guests a-doing?
Then the boy answered,
They all sleep sound.
And she asked him,
How fares my child?
And he replied,
In his cradle he sleeps.
Then she came up in the form of the queen to the cradle, and gave the child drink, shook up his bed, and covered him up, and then swam again away as a duck through the brook. The second night she came again, and on the third she said to the kitchen boy,
Go and tell the king to take his sword, and swing it thrice over me on the threshold.
Then the boy ran and told the king, who came with his sword, and, swinging it thrice over the duck, and at the third time his bride stood before him, bright, living, and healthful as she had been before. Now the king was in great happiness, but he hid the queen in a chamber until the Sunday when the child was to be christened. And when all was finished, he asked, What ought to be done to one who takes another out of bed and throws her into the river?
Nothing could be more proper, said the old woman, than to put such an one into a cask, struck round with nails, and to roll it down the hill into the water.
Then the king said, You have spoken your own sentence. And, ordering a cask to be fetched, he caused the old woman and her daughter to be put into it, and the bottom being nailed up, the cask was rolled down the hill until it fell into the water. Thus ends The Three Little Men in the Wood. In all of these stories with with stepmothers, evil stepmothers, where's the father? I know in some of them, like, he's already dead, but like in others, he's very much alive, just never present, which I think is odd, very, very odd. 1 second. I should actually mute some of these alerts just so they don't interrupt reading for people who later on want to just hear it. Or, yeah, eventually if I get around to editing these into a complete, cohesive audiobook. Not audiobook, but audio reading, I guess. So, this next story is The Three Spinsters. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term spinster, it's an older, unmarried woman. So let's begin. The Three Spinsters by the Brothers Grimm. There was one lazy girl who would not spin, and let her mother say what she would, she could not get her to work. At last the mother, getting both angry and impatient, gave her a blow, which made the girl cry very loud. And then the queen, passing by, heard the noise, and, stopping the carriage, she stepped into the house and asked the mother why she beat her daughter in such a way that the passers-by in the street heard her shrieks. The mother, however, was ashamed that her daughter's laziness should be known, and said, "I cannot make her leave off spinning. She will spin for ever and ever, and I am so poor that I cannot produce the flax." The queen replied, "I never heard anything I like better than spinning, and I am never more pleased than when the wheels are whirring. Let your daughter go with me to the castle. I have flax enough, and she may spin as much as she pleases." The mother was very glad at heart, and the queen took the girl home with her. As soon as they entered the castle, she led her up into 3 rooms, which were all full of the finest flax from top to bottom. "Now spin this flax for me," said the queen, "and when you have prepared it all, you shall have my eldest son for a husband. Although you are poor, I do not despise you on that account. Your unwearied industry is dowry enough. The girl, however, was inwardly frightened, for she could not have spun the flax had she sat there from morning till night until she was 300 years old. When she was left alone, she began to cry, and thus she sat 3 days without stirring a hand. On the 3rd day the queen came, and when she saw that nothing was yet spun, she wondered, and the maiden excused herself by saying that she had not been able to begin yet on account of her great sorrow at leaving her mother's house. So the queen was satisfied, but on leaving she said, "You must begin to work for me tomorrow." As soon as the girl was again alone, she knew not how to act or help herself, and in her vexation she went and looked out of a window. She saw 3 women passing by, the first of whom had a broad flat foot, the second such a large underlip that it reached nearly to her chin, and the third a very big thumb. They stopped before the window, and looking up, asked the girl what she wanted. She told them her trouble, and they offered her their help, saying, "Will you invite us to the wedding, and not be ashamed of us, but call us your aunts, and let us sit at your table? If you do all of these, we will spin the flax in a very short time for you." "With all my heart," replied the girl. "Come in and begin at once." Then she let in these 3 women, and, making a clear place in the first room, they sat themselves down and began spinning. One drew the thread and trod the wheel, the other moistened the thread, and the third pressed it and beat with her fingers on the table. And as soon as she did so, a pile of thread fell on the ground, which was spun in the finest manner. The girl hid the 3 spinsters, however, from the queen, and showed her, as often as she came, the heaps of spun yarn, so that she received no end of praise. When the first room was empty, the 3 women went to the second, and at length to the third, so that soon all was cleared out. Now the 3 spinsters took leave, saying to the girl, "Do not forget what you promised us. It will make your fortune." When the girl showed the queen the empty rooms and the great pile of thread, the wedding was performed, and the bridegroom was glad that he had such a clever and industrious wife, and praised her exceedingly. "I have 3 aunts," said the girl, "who have done me much service, so I would not willingly forget them in my good fortune. Allow me, therefore, to invite them to the wedding, and sit with me at table." the queen, and the bridegroom asked, "Why should we not allow it?" When the feast was begun, the 3 old maids entered in great splendor, and the bride said, "You are welcome, dear aunts." "Ah," said the bridegroom, "how do you come by such ugly friends?" And, going up to one with the big foot, he asked, "Why have you such a broad foot?" From treading, she replied. Then he went to the second, asked, "Why have you such an overhanging lip?" "From licking," she answered. "From licking." Then he asked the third, "Why have you such a broad thumb?" "From pressing the thread," she replied. "From pressing the thread." At this the prince was frightened and said, "Therefore my bride shall never touch a spinning wheel again." And so she was set free from the unlucky flax spinning. Thus ends the 3 spinsters. My mother-in-law does a lot of spinning, and she spins at her weekly get-together, as well as like every single time I see her out in public. So it's kind of cool to see her with a little spinning wheel. She has brought like a full-size one that looks like more traditional spinning wheel, but she mostly has just a little tiny electric one that she'll just spin yarn on. They can do weddings at the drop of a hat, can't they? Yeah, they can. There's like, oh yeah, a wedding feast, and I'm assuming some time just passes by, off screen, off tail. And then it's just like, oh yeah, and then they're married, and then a year goes by, or 20 years or whatever. It's like, so this happens, and then yada yada yada, and it's done. And conclusion. All right. So this next one is very famous. Probably the most famous Brothers Grimm story of hold on. It's actually spelled like that. Hansel and Gretel. In English, it tends to go for Gretel, as opposed to Grethel. Time isn't real. Time is a concept. A concept only followed by humans. Nobody else follows time. Literally too long, didn't read. All right. On to the most famous one. Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time there dwelt near a large wood a poor woodcutter and his wife, and had 2 children by his former marriage. The little boy, called Hansel, and the girl named Gretel. He had little enough to break or bite at once when there was a great famine in the land. He could not procure even his daily bread. And as he lay thinking in his bed one evening, rolling about for trouble, he sighed and said to his wife, "What will become of us? How can we feed our children when we have no more than we can eat ourselves?" "Know then, my husband," answered she, "we will lead them away quite early in the morning into the thickest part of the wood, and there make them a fire, and give them each a little piece of bread.
Then we will go to our work and leave them alone, so they will not find the way home again, and we shall be freed from them."
"No, wife," replied he, "that I can never do. How can you bring your heart to leave my children all alone in the wood, for the wild beasts will soon come and tear them to pieces?"
They had a lisp. No, they did not have a lisp. They were perfect speakers of the German language. It's just that's the way you say Gretel instead of Gretel. It's Gretel. "Oh, you simpleton," said she. "Then we must all four die of hunger. You had better plane the coffins for us." But she left him no peace till he consented, saying, "Ah, but shall I regret the poor children?" The two children, however, had not gone to sleep for very hunger, and so they overheard what the stepmother said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly, and said to Hansel, "What will become of us?" "Be quiet, Gretel," said he. "Do not cry. I will soon help you." And as soon as their parents had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his coat, and, unbarring the back door, slipped out. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay before the door seemed like silver pieces. They glistened so brightly. Hansel stooped down and put as many into his pocket as it would hold, and then, going back, he said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And so saying, he went to bed again. "To pieces! To pieces! Fall into pieces." The next morning, before the sun arose, the wife went and awoke the two children. "Get up, you lazy things! We are going into the forest to chop wood." Then she gave them each a piece of bread, saying, "There is something for your dinner. Do not eat it before the time, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread in her apron, for Hansel's pocket was full of pebbles, and so they all set out upon their way. When they had gone a little distance, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and this he repeated several times, till his father said, "Hansel, what are you peeping at? And why do you lag behind? Take care, and remember your legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my white cat sitting upon the roof of the house, and trying to say goodbye." "You simpleton," said the wife, "that is not a cat. It is only the sun shining on the white chimney." But in reality, Hansel was not looking at a cat, but every time he stopped, he dropped a pebble out of his pocket upon the path. When they came to the middle of the wood, and father told the children to collect wood, and he would make them a fire, so that they should not be cold. So Hansel and Gretel gathered together quite a little mountain of twigs. Then they set fire to them, and as the flame burnt up high, the wife said, "Now, you children, lie down near the fire and rest yourselves, whilst we go into the forest and chop wood. When we are ready, I will come and call you." Hansel and Gretel sat down by the fire, and when it was noon, each ate the piece of bread, and, because they could hear the blows of an axe, they thought their father was near. But it was not an axe, but a branch which he had bound to a withered tree.
so as to be blown to and fro by the wind. They waited so long that at last their eyes closed from weariness, and they fell fast asleep. When they awoke, it was quite dark, but Grethel began to cry. "How shall we get out of the wood?" But Hansel tried to comfort her by saying, "Wait a little while till the moon rises, and then we will quickly find the way." The moon soon shone forth, and Hansel, taking his sister's hand, followed the pebbles, which glittered like new coined silver pieces, and showed them the path. All night long they walked on, and as day broke they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw Hansel and Gretel, she exclaimed, "You wicked children! Why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you'd never be coming back home again." But their father was very glad, for it had grieved his heart to leave them all alone. Not long afterwards, there was again a great scarcity in every corner of the land, and one night the children overheard their mother saying to their father, "Everything is again consumed. We have only half a loaf left, and then the song is ended. The children must be sent away. We will take them deeper into the wood, so that they may not find the way out again. It is the only means of escape for us." But her husband felt heavy at heart, and thought, "It were better to share the last crust with the children." His wife, however, would listen to nothing that he said, and scolded and reproached him without end. He who says A must say B too, and he who consents the first time must also the second. The children, however, had heard the conversation as they lay awake, and as soon as the old people went to sleep, Hansel got up, intending to pick up some pebbles as before, but the wife had locked the door so that he could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted Grethel, saying, "Do not cry. Sleep in quiet. The good God will not forsake us." Early in the morning, the stepmother came and pulled them out of bed, and gave them each a slice of bread, which was still smaller than the former piece. On the way, Hansel broke his in his pocket, and, stopping every now and then, dropped a crumb upon the path. "Hansel, why do you stop and look about?" said the father. "Keep in the path." "I am looking at my little dove," answered Hansel, "nodding a good-bye to me." "Simpleton," said the wife, "that is no dove, but only the sun shining on the chimney." So Hansel kept dropping crumbs as he went along. The mother led the children deep into the wood, where they had never been before, and there, making an immense fire, she said to them, "Sit down here and rest, and when you feel tired, you can sleep for a while. But we are going into the forest to hew wood, and in the evening, when we are ready, we will come and fetch you." When noon came, Grethel shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewn his on the path. Then they went to sleep. But the evening arrived, and no one came to visit the poor children. And in the dark night they awoke, and Hansel comforted his sister by saying, "Only wait, Grethel, till the moon comes out. Then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have dropped, and they will show us the way home." The moon shone, and they got up, but they could not see any crumbs, for the thousands of birds which had been flying about in the wood and fields had picked them all up. Hansel kept saying to Grethel, "We will soon find the way." But they did not, and they walked the whole night long and the next day. But still they did not come out of the wood. And they got so hungry, for they had nothing to eat but the berries which they found upon the bushes. Soon they got so tired that they could not drag themselves along, so they laid down under a tree and went to sleep. I'd say don't have kids, but she didn't. Yeah, they're not hers. Which is why she's like, they're disposable. I can make more, right? It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house, and they still walked on, but they only got deeper and deeper into the wood, and Hansel saw that if help did not come very soon, they would die of hunger. As soon as it was noon, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting upon a bough, which sang so sweetly they stood still and listened to it. It soon left off, and spreading its wings flew off, and they followed it until it arrived at a cottage, upon the roof of which it was perched. And when they went close up to it, they saw that the cottage was made of bread and cakes, and the window panes were of clear sugar. "We will go in there," said Hansel, "and have a glorious feast. I will eat a piece of the roof, and you can eat the windows. Will they not be sweet?" So Hansel reached up and broke a piece off the roof in order to see how it tasted, while Gretel stepped up to the window and began to bite it. Then a sweet voice called out in the room, "Tip-tap, tip-tap, who raps at my door?" And the children answered, the wind, the child of heaven." And they went on eating without interruption. Hansel thought the roof tasted very nice, and so he tore off a great piece, while Gretel broke a large round pane out of the window and sat down quite contentedly. Just then the door opened, and a very old woman, walking upon crutches, came out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands, but the old woman, nodding her head, said, "Ah, you dear children, what has brought you here? Come in and stop with me, and no harm shall befall you." And so saying, she took them both by the hand and led them into her cottage. A good meal of milk and pancakes, with sugar and apples and nuts, were spread on the table, and in the back room were two nice little beds, covered with white, where Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down and thought themselves in heaven. The old woman had behaved very kindly to them, but in reality she was a wicked witch who waylaid children and built the bread house in order to entice them in. But as soon as they were in her power, she killed them, cooked and ate them, and made a great festival of the day. Witches have red eyes and cannot see very far, but they have a fine sense of smelling, like wild beasts, and so they know when children approach them. When Hansel and Gretel came near the witch's house, she laughed wickedly, saying, "Here come two who shall not escape me." And early in the morning, before they awoke, she went up to them and saw how lovingly they lay sleeping with their chubby little red cheeks. And she mumbled to herself, "That will be a good bite." Then she took up Hansel with a rough hand and shut him up in a little cage with a lattice door. And although he screamed loudly, it was of no use. Gretel came next, and, shaking her till she awoke, she said,
Get up, you lazy thing, and fetch some water to cook something good for your brother, who must remain in that stall and get fat. When he is fat enough, I shall eat him."
Grethel began to cry, but it was all useless, for the old witch made her do as she wished. So a nice meal was cooked for Hansel, but Grethel got nothing else but a crab's claw. Every morning the old witch came to the cage and said,
"Hansel, stretch your finger that I may feel whether you are getting fat."
But Hansel used to stretch out a bone, and the old woman, having very bad sight, thought it was his finger, and wondered very much that he did not get fat. When 4 weeks have passed, and Hansel still kept quite lean, she lost all her patience and would not wait any longer.
"Grethel,"
she called out in a passion,
"get some water quickly. Be Hansel fat or lean, this morning I will kill and cook him."
Oh, how the poor little sister grieved as she was forced to fetch the water, and how fast the tears ran down her cheeks.
"Dear good God, help us now," she exclaimed. "Had we only been eaten by the wild beasts in the wood, then we should have died together."
But the old witch called out,
"Leave off that noise. It will not help you a bit."
So early in the morning, Grethel was forced to go out and fill the kettle and make a fire.
"First we will bake, however," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough."
And so saying, she pushed poor Grethel up to the oven, out of which the flames were burning fiercely.
"Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is hot enough, and then we will put in the bread."
But she intended, when Grethel got in, to shut up the oven and let her bake, so that she might eat her as well as Hansel. Grethel perceived what her thoughts were, and said,
"I do not know how to do it. How shall I get in?" "You stupid goose," said she. "The opening is big enough. See, I could even get in myself."
And she got up and put her head into the oven. Then Grethel gave her a push so that she fell right in, and then, shutting the iron door, she bolted it. Oh, how horribly she howled! But Grethel ran away and left the ungodly witch to burn to ashes. Now she ran to Hansel, and, opening his door, called out, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." So he sprang out, like a bird out of his cage when the door is opened, and they were so glad that they fell upon each other's neck and kissed each other over and over again. And now there was nothing to fear. They went into the witch's house, where in every corner were caskets full of pearls and precious stones. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel, putting as many into his pocket as it would hold, while Grethel thought, "I will take some home too," and filled her apron full. "We must be off now," said Hansel, "and get out of this bewitched forest." But when they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a large piece of water. "We cannot get over," said Hansel. "I can see no bridge at all." "And there is no boat either," said Grethel. "But there swims a white duck. I will ask her to help us over." And she sang, "Little duck, good little duck, Grethel and Hansel, here we stand. There is neither stile nor bridge. Take us on your back to land." So the duck came to them, and Hansel sat himself on,
and bade his sister sit behind him. "No," answered Grethel, "that will be too much for the duck. She shall take us over one at a time." This the good little bird did, and when both were happily arrived on the other side, they had gone a little way. They came to a well-known wood, which they knew the better every step they went, and at last they perceived their father's house. Then they began to run, and, bursting into the house, they fell on their father's neck. He had not had one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest, and his wife was dead. Grethel shook her apron, and the pearls and precious stones rolled out upon the floor, and Hansel threw down one handful after the other out of his pocket. Then all their sorrows were ended, and they lived together in great happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whoever catches her may make a great, great cap out of her fur. Thus ends Hansel and Gretel. This is an interesting stop at the end. Having silver coins shine. That's because of silver tarnishes, which is why you have to keep polishing it, which is what they used to do back then in the 1800s when they had silverware made of actual silver. Some of them had pewter later on. Talani606, thank you for the follow. Thank you for following. Let's see now. I was trying to remember what else I noticed in this as I was telling it. Oh yeah, just the. It's like, oh yeah, it's a witch, and you should always burn those. Yeah. Oh yeah, and his wife was dead. Yeah, she was dead. So we don't have to worry about any retribution or the kids telling her that she's awful for leaving them in the woods. This next story is the 3 snake leaves. I've never heard this one before, but that's interesting. Must just be a style of leaf they have in Germany. Okay, so the sound alert didn't go off, but I'm not seeing anything on my activity feed, which is kind of weird. Kick's being a little off, as well as Twitches too, because it should follow. Yeah, because it was on the activity feed. I'm not seeing anything. That's weird. All right, anyway, let us begin. The 3 Snake Leaves by the brothers Grimm. There was once a poor man who was unable to feed his only son any longer. So the son said, "My dear father, everything goes badly with you, and I am a burden to you. I would rather go away and see how I can earn my own bread." So the father gave him his blessing and took leave of him with great grief. At the time, the king of a powerful empire was at war, and the youth taking service under him went with him to the field. When he came in sight of the enemy,
Battle was given, and he was in great peril, and the arrows fell so fast that his comrades fell around him on all sides. And when the captain was killed, the rest would have taken to flight. But the youth, stepping forward, spoke to them courageously, exclaiming, "We will not let our fatherland be ruined." Then the others followed him, and then pressed on and beat the enemy. As soon as the king heard that he had to thank him alone for the victory, he raised him above all the others, gave him great treasures, and made him first in his kingdom. Now the king had a daughter who was very beautiful, but she was also very whimsical. She had made a vow never to take a lord and husband who would not promise, if she should die first, to let himself be buried alive with her.
"Does he love me with all his heart?" said she. "What use to him, then, can his life be afterwards?"
At the same time, she was prepared to do the same thing, and if her husband should die first, to descend with him to the grave. This vow had hitherto frightened away all suitors, but the youth was so taken with her beauty that he waited for nothing, but immediately asked in her marriage of her father. "Do you know," said the king, "what you must promise?" "I must go with her into the grave," he replied, "if I survive her, but my love is so great that I mind not the danger." Then the king consented, and the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. For a long time they lived happily and contented with one another, until it happened that the young queen fell grievously sick, so that no physician could cure her. When she died, the young prince remembered his forced promise, and shuddered at the thought of lying himself alive in the grave. But there was no escape, for the king had set watchers at all the doors, and it was not possible to avoid his fate. When the day came that the body should be laid in the royal vault, he was led away with it, and the door closed and locked behind him. Near the coffin stood a table, having upon it 4 lights, 4 loaves of bread, and 4 bottles of wine. As soon as this supply came to an end, he must die of hunger. Full of bitterness and sorrow, he sat down, eating each day but a little morsel of bread, and taking but 1 draught of wine. Every day he saw death approaching nearer and nearer. Whilst he thus sat gazing before him, he saw a snake creeping out of the corner of the vault, which approached the dead body. Thinking that it came to feed on the body, he drew his sword, and exclaiming, "So long as I live, you shall not touch her," he cut it in 3 pieces. After a while, another snake crawled out of the corner. But when it saw the other lying dead, it went back, and returned soon with 3 green leaves in its mouth. Then it took the 3 pieces of the snake, and, laying them together so as to join, it put 1 leaf upon each wound. As soon as the divided parts were joined, the snake moved and was alive again, and both snakes hastened away together. The leaves remained lying on the ground, and the unfortunate king, who had seen all, bethought himself whether the miraculous power of the leaves, which had restored a snake to life, might not help a man. So he picked up the leaves and laid 1 on the mouth of the corpse, and the other 2 on her eyes. and he had scarcely done so when the blood circulated again in the veins, and, mounting into her pale countenance, flushed it with color. And she drew her breath, opened her eyes, and said, "Ah, where am I?" "You are with me, dear wife," he replied, and told her how everything had happened, and how he had brought her to life. Then he helped her to some wine and bread, and when her strength had returned, she raised herself up, and they went to the door, and knocked and shouted so loudly that the watchers heard them and told the king. The king came down himself and opened the door, and there found them both alive and well, and he rejoiced with them that their trouble had passed away. But the young king took away the 3 snake leaves, and gave them to his servant, saying, "Preserve them carefully for me, and carry them with you at all times. Who knows in what necessity they may not help us?" A change, however, had come over the wife after she was restored to life, and it was as if all the love for her husband had passed out of her heart. And when, some little time after, he wished to make a voyage over the sea to his old father, and they had gone on board the ship, she forgot the great love and fidelity which he had shown, and through which he had saved her life, and disclosed a wicked plan to the captain. When the young prince lay asleep, she called up the captain, and, taking the sleeper by the head, while he carried the feet, they threw the prince into the sea. And as soon as the evil deed was done, she said to the captain, "Now let us return home, and say he died on the voyage. I will so praise and commend you to my father that he shall give you to me in marriage, and you shall sit as his heir." Like, hiss, no hope, hiss. Snake jazz. Oh yeah, I've heard this in another story as well from the 1800s. It's called Frankenstein. So avoid necromancy. They always come back changed. And not in a good way. But the faithful servant, who had seen all unremarked, let loose a little boat from the ship, and, getting in it himself, rowed after his master, and let the betrayers sail away. He fished the dead body up again, and, by the help of the 3 snake leaves, which he carried with him, he brought him happily to life again. Then they both rowed away with all their strength, day and night, and their little boat glided on so fast that they arrived before the others at the old king's palace. He marveled to see them return alone, and asked what had happened. When he heard of the wickedness of his daughter, he said, "I can scarcely believe that she has done such evil, but the truth will soon come to light." Then he bade them both go into a secret chamber and keep themselves private from everybody. Soon afterwards, the great vessel came sailing up, and the godless wife appeared before her father with a sorrowful countenance. "Why are you returned alone?" he asked. "Where is your husband?" "Alas, dear father," she replied, "I return home with great grief, for my husband was suddenly taken ill during the voyage and died. and if the good captain had not given me his assistance, it would have gone terribly with me. He was present at my husband's death, and can tell you all about it." The king said, "I will bring the dead to life." And opening the chamber, he bade the prince and his servant both to come forth. As soon as the wife perceived her husband, she was struck as if by lightning, and, falling on her knees, she begged his pardon. But the king answered, "For you there is no pardon. He was ready to die with you, and gave you life again, but you have conspired against him in his sleep, and shall receive your due reward." Then she was put, with her companion in crime, on board a ship which was pierced with holes and drawn out into the sea, and they soon sank beneath the waves. Thus ends the 3 snake leaves. So he kills his own daughter, or allows her to die in a faulty ship with a captain. And basically, I don't know, has this random guy who joins his army from a very poor father and wins him a great battle as his heir. And this king has no queen. So that shows you how important family was to the nobility, or at least what the peasantry thought the nobility thought of themselves. This next story is another famous one. Rapunzel.
Nope. Put it behind you.
Oh, thank you.
I've been here for a minute.
I know. But I'm reading. Rapunzel is a pretty famous one. Also, a lot of these were done by Disney because they were fair use at the time. And that's how Disney made a lot of their money. It was just on fair use works, animating them. So this one was also one made by Disney with oh God, why am I blanking on her name? Mandy Moore, voicing Rapunzel, with like the super long hair. Which I have a friend who has, really super long hair, but not as long as Rapunzel's. I have seen like something in like the Guinness Book of World Records or something like that, where it's showing the woman with the longest hair, and she just has like massive hair. Would love to see the animated one for that last one. Well, it might be fairly short. Mother knows best. All right, so let's begin. Rapunzel by the brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there lived a man and his wife who much wished to have a child, but for a long time in vain. These people had a little window in the back part of their house, out of which one could see into a beautiful garden, which was full of fine flowers and vegetables, but it was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go in, because it belonged to a witch who possessed great power. and who was feared by the whole world. One day the woman stood at this window looking into the garden, and there she saw a bed which was filled with the most beautiful radishes, and which seemed so fresh and green that she felt quite glad, and a great desire seized her to eat of these radishes. This wish returned daily, and as she knew that she could not partake of them, she fell ill and looked very pale and miserable. This frightened her husband. "Ah," she replied, "if I cannot get any of those radishes to eat out of the garden behind the house, I shall die." The husband, loving her very much, thought, "Rather than let my wife die, I must fetch her some radishes, cost what they may." So in the gloom of the evening he climbed the wall of the witch's garden, and, snatching a handful of radishes in great haste, brought them to his wife, who made herself a salad with them, which she ate with relish. However, they were so nice and so well flavored that the next day, after she felt the same desire for the third time, and could not get any rest, so that her husband was obliged to promise her some more. So, in the evening, he made himself ready and began clambering up the wall. But oh, how terribly frightened he was, for there he saw the old witch standing before him. "How dare you?" she began, looking at him with a frightful scowl. "How dare you climb over into my garden to take away my radishes like a thief? Evil shall happen to you for this." "Ah," replied he, "let pardon be granted before justice. I have only done this from a great necessity. My wife saw your radishes from her window, and took such a fancy to them that she would have died if she had not eaten of them." Then the witch ran after him in a passion, saying, "If she behave as you say, I will let you take away all the radishes you please. But I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. All shall go well with it, and I will care for it like a mother." In his anxiety, the man consented, and when the child was born, the witch appeared at the same time, gave the child the name Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful child under the sun, and when she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower which stood in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, and only one little window just at the top. When the witch wished to enter, she stood beneath and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." For Rapunzel had long and beautiful hair, as fine as spun gold, and as soon as she heard the witch's voice, she unbound her tresses, opened the window, and then the hair fell down 20 ells, and the witch mounted up by it. After a couple of years had passed away, it happened that the king's son was riding through the wood, and came by the tower. There he heard a song so beautiful that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel, who, to pass the time of her loneliness away, was exercising her sweet voice. The king's son wished to ascend to her, and looked for a door to the tower, but he could not find one. So he rode home, but the song had touched his heart so much that he went every day to the forest and listened to it. And, as he thus stood one day behind a tree, he saw the witch come up
and heard her call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down her tresses, and the witch mounted up. "Is that the ladder on which one must climb? Then I will try my luck too," said the prince. And the following day, as he felt quite lonely, he went to the tower and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then the tresses fell down, and he climbed up. Rapunzel was much frightened at first when a man came in, for she had never seen one before. But the king's son began to talk in a friendly way to her, and told her how his heart had been so moved by her singing that he had no peace until he had seen her himself. So Rapunzel lost her terror, and when he asked her if she would have him for a husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "Anyone may have me rather than the old woman." So saying, "Yes," she put her hand within his. "I will willingly go with you, but I know not how I am to descend. When you come, bring with you a skein of silk each time, out of which I will weave a ladder, and when it is ready, I will come down by it, and you must take me upon your horse." Then they agreed that they should never meet till the evening, as the witch came in the daytime. The old woman remarked nothing about it, until one time Rapunzel began to say to her, "Tell me, mother, how it happens you find it more difficult to come up to me than the young king's son, who is with me in a moment." "Oh, you wicked child!" exclaimed the witch. "What do I hear? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." And, seizing Rapunzel's beautiful hair in a fury, she gave her a couple of blows with her left hand, and taking a pair of scissors in her right, snip, snap, she cut it all off, and the beautiful tresses lay upon the ground. Then she was so hard-hearted that she took the poor maiden into a great desert, and left her to live in great misery and grief. But the same day, when the old witch had carried Rapunzel off, in the evening she made the tresses fast above to the window latch, and when the king's son came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let them down. The prince mounted, but when he got to the top he found not his dear Rapunzel, but the witch, who looked at him with furious and wicked eyes. "Aha!" she exclaimed scornfully. "You would fetch your dear wife, but the beautiful bird sits no longer in her nest, singing. The cat has taken her away, and will now scratch out your eyes. To you, Rapunzel is lost. You will never see her again." The prince lost his senses with grief at these words, and sprang out of the window of the tower in his bewilderment. His life he escaped with, but the thorns onto which he fell put out his eyes. So he wandered, blind, in the forest, eating nothing but roots and berries, and doing nothing but weeping and lamenting for the loss of his dear wife. He wandered about thus in great misery for some few years, and at last arrived at the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, lived in great sorrow. Hearing a voice which he thought he knew, he went up to her, and as he approached, Rapunzel recognized him and fell upon his neck and wept. 2 of her tears moistened his eyes, and they became clear again, so that he could see as well as formerly. Then he led her away to his kingdom, where he was received with great demonstrations of joy, and where they lived long contented and happy. What became of the old witch, no one ever knew. Thus ends Rapunzel. What was one little thing? Oh, yeah. So she gets locked up in a tower starting at 12 years old. Then a prince, hears her after a year or so, maybe. And then they start courting, I guess. And then then she gets banished, or then she gets thrown into a desert. And he gets his eyes put out and is wandering around alone for years. A nobleman, just wandering around blind. Good thing he could find roots and berries easily for years. Until last he comes to a desert. That's a long way to go from a forest to a desert. Usually. This next story is entitled The White Snake. The snake. Danger noodle. So let us begin. The White Snake by the brothers Grimm. A long while ago, there lived a king whose wisdom was world-renowned. Nothing remained unknown to him, and it seemed as if the tidings of the most hidden things were borne to him through the air. But he had one strange custom. Every noontime, when the table was quite cleared, and no one else was present, his trusty servant had to bring him a dish, which was covered up, and the servant himself did not know what lay in it, and no man knew, for the king never uncovered it, nor ate thereof, until he was quite alone. This went on for a long time, until one day such a violent curiosity seized the servant, who, as usual, carried the dish, that he could not resist the temptation, and took the dish into his chamber. As soon as he had carefully locked the door, he raised the cover, and there lay before him a white snake. At the sight he could not restrain the desire to taste it, so he cut a piece off and put it in his mouth. But scarcely had his tongue touched it when he heard before the window a curious whispering of low voices. He went and listened, and found out that it was the sparrows who were conversing with one another, and relating what each had seen in field or wood. The morsel of the snake had given him the power to understand the speech of animals. Now it happened just on this day that the queen lost her finest ring, and suspicion fell on this faithful servant, who had the care of all the rings, that he had stolen it. The king ordered him to appear before him, and threatened in angry words that he should be taken up and tried if he did not know before the morrow whom to name as the guilty person. He protested his innocence in vain, and was sent away without any mitigation on the sentence. In his anxiety and trouble he went away into the courtyard, thinking how he might help himself. There, on a running stream of water, the ducks were congregated familiarly together, and smoothing themselves down with their beaks while they held a confidential conversation.
The servants stood still and listened to them as they narrated to each other whereabouts they had waddled and what nice food they had found. And one said in a vexed tone, "Something very hard is in my stomach, for in my haste I swallowed a ring which lay under the queen's window." Then the servant caught the speaker up by his neck and carried her to the cook, saying, "Just kill this fowl, it is finely fat." "Yes," said the cook, weighing in it her hand. "It has spared no trouble in cramming itself. It ought to have been roasted long ago." So saying, she chopped off its head, and when she cut it open, in its stomach was found the queen's ring. Now the servant was able to prove easily his innocence to the queen, and, as she wished to repair her injustice, she granted him her pardon and promised him the greatest place of honor which he wished for at court. The servant refused everything, and only requested a horse and money, for he had a desire to see the world, and to travel about it for a while. As soon as his request was granted, he set off on his tour, and came one day by a pond, in which he remarked 3 fishes, which were caught in the reeds, and lay gasping for water. Although men say fishes are dumb, yet he understood their complaint, that they must die so miserably. Having a compassionate heart, he dismounted and put the 3 prisoners again into the water. They splashed about for joy, and putting their heads above water, said to him, "We shall be grateful and repay you for saving us." He rowed onwards, and, after a while, it happened that he heard, as it were, a voice in the sand at his feet. He listened and perceived that an ant-king was complaining thus: "If these men could but keep away their great fat beasts! Here comes an awkward horse treading my people underfoot unmercifully." So he rode on to the side path, and the ant-king called to him, "We will be grateful and reward you." His way led him into a forest, and there he saw a male and female crow, standing by their nests, and dragging their young out. "Off with you, gallows birds!" they exclaimed. "We can feed you no longer. You are big enough now to help yourselves." The poor young ones lay on the ground, fluttering and bleating their wings and crying, "We, helpless children, we must feed ourselves, we who cannot fly yet. What is left to us but to die here of hunger?" Then the servant dismounted, and, killing his horse with his sword, left it for the young crows to feed upon. They soon hopped upon it, and when they were satisfied, they exclaimed, "We will be grateful, and will reward you in time of need." He was obliged now to use his own legs, and after he had gone a long way, he came to a large town, where the streets there was a great crowd, and shouting, and a man upon horseback riding along, who proclaimed, "The princess seeks a husband, but he who would win her must perform a difficult task, and, if he should not luckily complete it, his life will be forfeited." Many had tried already, but in vain. Their lives had been forfeited. But the youth, when he had seen the princess, was so blinded by her beauty that he forgot all danger, and, stepping before the king, offered himself as a suitor. Immediately he was conducted to the sea, and a golden ring thrown in before his eyes. Then the king bade him fetch this ring up again from the bottom of the sea, adding,
If you rise without the ring, you shall be thrown in again and again until you perish in the waves." Each one pitied the handsome youth, and then left him alone on the seashore. There he stood considering what he should do, and presently he saw 3 fishes at once swimming towards him, and they were no others than the 3 whose lives he had saved. The middle one bore a mussel shell in its mouth, which it laid on the shore at the feet of the youth, who, taking up and opening it, found the gold ring within. Full of joy, he brought it to the king, expecting that he should receive his promised reward. But the proud princess, when she saw that he was not her equal in birth, was ashamed of him, and desired that he should undertake a second task. She went into the garden, and strewed there 10 bags of millet seed in the grass. "These he must pick up by morning, before the sunrise, and let him not venture to miss 1 grain." The youth sat himself down in the garden, thinking how it was possible to perform the task, but he could not discover. And so he sat there sorrowfully, awaiting the dawn of day to be conducted to death. But as soon as the first rays of the sun fell on the garden, he saw that the 10 sacks were all filled, and standing by him, while not a single grain remained in the grass, the ant-king had come in the night with his thousands and thousands of men, and the grateful insects had collected the millet with great industry, and put it into the sacks. The princess herself came into the garden, and saw with wonder that the youth had performed what was required of him. But still she could not bend her proud heart, and she said, "Although he may have done these 2 tasks, yet he shall not be my husband until he has brought me an apple from the tree of life." The youth did not know where the tree of life stood. He got up, indeed, and was willing to go so long as his legs bore him, but he had no hope of finding it. After he had wandered through 3 kingdoms, he came by evening into a forest, and, sitting down under a tree, he wished to sleep, when he heard a rustling in the branches, and a golden apple fell into his hand. At the same time 3 ravens flew down and settled on his knee, saying, "We are the 3 young ravens whom you saved from dying of hunger, when we were grown up and heard you sought the golden apple. Then we flew over the sea, even to the end of the world, where stands the tree of life, and we have fetched you the apple." Full of joy, the youth set out homewards, and presented the golden apple to the beautiful princess, who now had no more excuses. So they divided the apple of life and ate it between them. Then their heart was filled with love towards him, and they lived to a great age in undisturbed tranquility. Thus ends The White Snake. Yes, it ended, escalated very quickly. But yeah, you have to perform 3 tasks. So this next one is entitled The Fisherman and His Wife. Yeah, you always have to perform 3 tasks. 3 is a sacred number. The second odd number. So, let's get to it.
The Fisherman and His Wife by the brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a fisherman and his wife who lived together in a little hut near the sea. And every day he went down to fish. There he sat with his rod and looked out upon the blank water. And this he did for many a long day. One morning the line went to the bottom, and when he drew it up, a great flounder was hooked at the end. The flounder said to him, "Let me go, and I pray you, fisherman. I am not a real fish, but an enchanted prince. What good shall I do you if you pull me up? I shall not taste well. Put me back into the water, and let me swim."
"Ah," said the man, "you need not make such a palver. A fish which can speak I would rather let swim." And so saying, he put the fish into the water, and as it sunk to the bottom, it left a long streak of blood behind it. Then the fisherman got up and went back to his wife in their hut. "Have you caught nothing today, husband?" said she. "Oh," he replied, "I caught a flounder who said that he was an enchanted prince, and so I threw him again into the sea to swim." "Did you not wish first?" she inquired. "No," said he. "Ah," said the wife, "that is very unlucky. It is one to remain in this hovel forever. You might have wished for a better hut at least. Go again and call him. Tell him we choose to have a better hut, and for certain you'll get it."
"Ah," replied he, "how shall I manage that?"
"Why," said his wife, "you must catch him again, and before you let him swim away, he will grant you what you ask. Be quick." The man was not much pleased, and wished his wife further, but nevertheless he went down to the sea. When he came to the water, it was green and yellow, and looked still more blank. He stood by it and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, hither quickly come to me. For my wife, Dame Isabel, wishes what I scarce dare tell." Then the fish came swimming up and said, "What do you want with me?" "Oh," said the man, "I was to catch you again, for my wife says I ought to have wished before. She won't stay any longer in her hovel, and desires a cottage." "Go home again," said the flounder. "She has it already." So the fisherman departed, and there was his wife, no longer in the dirty hovel, for in its place stood a clean cottage, before whose door she sat upon a bench. She took him by the hand, saying, "Come in now and see. Is not this much better?" So in they went, and in the cottage there was a beautiful parlour, and a fine fireplace, and a chamber where a bed stood. There were also a kitchen and a storeroom, with nice earthenware, all of the best, tinware and copper vessels, and everything very clean and neat. At the back was a large yard, with hens and chickens, as well as a nice garden, full of fruit trees and vegetables. "See," said the wife, "is this not charming?" "Yes," said her husband, "so long as it blooms, you will be very well content with it." "We will consider about that," she replied, and they went to bed. Thus 8 to 14 days passed on, when the wife said, "Husband, the hut is far too narrow for me, and the yard and garden are so small. The flounder may very well give us a larger house. I wish to live in a large stone palace. Go, then, to the flounder and ask him to give us a castle."
"Ah, wife," said he, "the cottage is good enough. Why should you choose to have a castle?"
"Go along," she replied. "The flounder will soon give you that."
"Nay, wife," he said, "the flounder gave us the cottage at first, but when I go again he will perhaps be angry."
"Never you mind," said she. "He can do what I wish for very easily and willingly. Go again and try."
The husband was vexed at heart and did not like going, and said to himself, "This is not right." But at last he set off. The lifespan of a fish is, depending on the fish. A flounder, I don't know, maybe, 10 years? Crumble, grumble. When he came to the sea, the water was quite clouded and deep blue colored, and black and thick. It looked green no longer, yet it was calm. So he went and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, hither quickly come to me. For my wife, Dame Isabel, wishes what I scarce dare tell." 67, so I was close. "Now then, what do you want?" said the flounder. "Oh," said the man, half frightened, "she wants to live in a great stone castle." "Go home and see it at your door," replied the fish. The fisherman went away, and lo, where formerly his house stood, there was a great stone castle, and his wife called to him from the steps to come in, and, taking him by the hand, she said, "Now let us look about." So they walked about, and in the castle there was a great hall with marble tables, and there were ever so many servants, who ushered them through folding doors into rooms hung all round with tapestry, and filled with fine golden stools and chairs, with crystal looking-glasses on the walls, and all the rooms were similarly fitted up. Outside the house were large courtyards with horse and cow stalls and wagons, all of the best, and besides a beautiful garden filled with magnificent flowers and fruit trees, and a meadow full a mile long, covered with deer and oxen and sheep, as many as one could wish for. "Is this not pretty?" said the wife. "Ah," said her husband, "so long as the humor lasts you will be content with this, and then you will want something else." "We will think about that," said she, and with that they went to bed. Where did the servants come from? They're on loan from the Fish Prince. They're on loan from Mari Mari. The next morning the wife woke up just as it was day, and looked out over the fine country which lay before her. Her husband did not get up, and there she stood with her arms akimbo, and called out, "Get up, and come and look here at the window. See, shall I not be queen over all the land? Go and say to the flounder, we choose to be king and queen." "Ah, wife," said he, "why should I wish to be king?" "No," she replied, "you do not wish, so I will be queen. Go and tell the flounder so." "Oh, why do you wish this? I cannot say it."
"Why not? Go off at once. I must be queen."
The husband set out quite stupefied, but she would have her way, and when he came to the sea, it was quite black-looking, and the water splashed up and smelled very disagreeably. But he stood still and repeated, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, hither quickly come to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wishes what I scarce dare tell."
"What does she want now?" asked the flounder.
"Ah," said he, "she would be queen."
"Go home, she is so already,"
replied the fish. So he departed, and when he came near the palace, he saw it had become much larger, with a great tower and gateway in front of it. And before the gate stood a herald, and there were many soldiers with kettle drums and trumpets. When he came into the house, he found everything made with the purest marble and gold, with magnificent curtains fringed with gold. Through the hall he went in at the doors, where the great court apartment was, and there sat his wife upon a high throne of gold and diamonds, having a crown of gold upon her head, and a sceptre of precious stones in her hand, and upon each side stood 6 pages in a row, each one a head taller than the other. Then he went up and said, "Ah, wife, are you queen now?"
"Yes," said she, "now I am queen."
There he stood looking for a long time. At last he said, "Ah, wife, how do you like being queen? Now we have nothing else to choose."
"No, indeed," she replied. "I am very dissatisfied. Time and tide do not wait for me. I can bear it no longer. Go then to the flounder. Queen am I. Now I must be pope."
"Ah, wife, what would you? The pope thou canst not be. The pope is the head of Christendom. The flounder cannot make you that."
"I will be pope," replied the wife,
and he was obliged to go. And when he came to the shore, the sea was running mountains high, and the sky was so black that he was quite terrified, and began to say in a great fright, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, quickly, quickly come to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wishes what I scarce dare tell."
"What now?"
said the flounder. "She wants to be pope," said he.
"Go home and find her so,"
was the reply. So he went back and found a great church, in which she was sitting upon a much higher throne, with 2 rows of candles on each side, some as thick as towers, down to those no bigger than rushlights. And before her footstool were kings and queens kneeling. "Wife," said he, "now be contented, since you are pope. You cannot be anything else."
"That I will consider about," she replied.
And so they went to bed, but she could not sleep for thinking what she should be next. Very early she rose and looked out of the window, and, as she saw the sun rising, she thought to herself, "Why should I not do that?" And so she shook her husband and called out to him,
"Go, tell the flounder I want to make the sun rise."
Her husband was so frightened that he tumbled out of bed, but she would hear nothing, and he was obliged to go. When he got down to the sea, a tremendous storm was raging, and the ships and boats were tossing about in all directions. Then he shouted out, but could not hear his own words, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, quickly, quickly come to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wishes what I scarce dare tell."
What would she have now? Said the fish. Ah, he replied, she wants to be ruler of the universe. Return and find her back in her hovel, replied the flounder. And there the fisherman and his wife remained for the rest of their days. Thus ends The Fisherman and His Wife. Yeah, Queen Pope, yet she was still married to her husband. Yes, the Queen Pope. Odd how that happens in a religious patriarchy. What?
Queen Pope was where you drew the line? Really?
Well, I mean, it's just exceedingly impractical.
The castle!
Listen, a prince can grant them a castle.
Did he say he was a prince?
Yes, he said he was a prince.
Okay.
He said he was a fish prince.
Okay. So Mari's married. Or engaged.
No. Oh. She just has she just has servants. Fish servants.
She's the fish princess.
Yes. So, like, all the servants that, his wife and him got, were all from, on loan from fish princesses. Or fish monarchy.
Yeah.
Or from, Saba. Mm-hmm. This next story is entitled The Valiant Little Tailor. Forgot a T there. I remember in other stories of that version, instead of her becoming Pope, I think she wanted to be Empress or something like that, and then be able to command the sun to rise and set. Yeah, he can convene the College of Cardinal. A random fish prince can convene the College of Cardinals and have her elected Pope. He's able to rig the ballot like that. So let us begin. I mean, if she wanted to be God, then someday then some would day she never existed. What? It doesn't say some would say. It says some would day. Yay, spell. Autocorrect. Yeah, but this is heavily Christianized Europe. So anyone who would say that is obviously a heretic. A heretic! Heresy detected. All right. The Valiant Little Tailor by the brothers Grimm. Also entitled 7 at 1 Below. 7 at 1 Below.
One summer's morning, a tailor was sitting on his bench by the window in very good spirits, sewing away with all his might, and presently up the street came a peasant woman, crying, "God, good preserves for sale! Good preserves for sale!" This cry sounded nice in the tailor's ears, and sticking his diminutive head out of the window, he called out, "Here, my good woman, just bring your wares here." The woman mounted the 3 steps up to the tailor's house with her heavy basket, and began to unpack all the pots together before him. He looked at them all, held them up to the light, put his nose to them, and said at last, "These preserves appear to be very nice. So you may weigh me out 4½ ounces, my good woman. I don't mind even if you make it 1/4 pound." The woman, who expected to have met with such a good customer, gave him what he wished, and went away grumbling, very much dissatisfied. Odd. That's an odd sentence. "Now," exclaimed the tailor, "heaven will send me a blessing on this preserve, and give me fresh strength and vigor." And taking the bread out of the cupboard, he cut himself a slice the size of the whole loaf, and spread the preserve on it. "That will taste by no means bad," said he, "but before I have a bite, I will just get this waistcoat finished." So he laid the bread down near him and stitched away, making larger and larger stitches every time for joy. Meanwhile, the smell of the preserve mounted to the ceiling, where flies were sitting in great numbers, and enticed them down, so that soon a regular swarm of them had settled on the bread. "Holla! Who invited you?" exclaimed the tailor, hunting away the unbidden guest. But the flies, not understanding his language, would not be driven off, and came again in greater numbers than before. This put the little man in a boiling passion, and snatching up in his rage a rag of cloth, he brought it down with an unmerciful swoop upon them. When he raised it again, he counted no less than 7 lying dead before him with outstretched legs. "What a fellow you are," said he to himself, wondering at his own bravery. "The whole town shall know of this." In great haste he cut himself out a band, hemmed it, and then put in large characters, 7 at one blow. "Ah," said he, "not one city alone, the whole world shall know of it." And his heart fluttered with joy like a lambkin's tail. The little tailor bound the belt round his body, and prepared to travel forth into the wide world, thinking the workshop too small for his valiant deeds. Before he set out, however, he looked round his house to see if there was anything he could take with him, but found only an old cheese, which he pocketed, and remarking a bird before the door which was entangled in the bushes, he caught it and put that in his pocket also. Directly after, he set out bravely on his travels, and, as he was light and active, he felt no weariness. His road led up a hill, and when he reached the highest point of it,
he found a great giant sitting there, who was looking about him very composedly. The little tailor, however, went boldly up and said, "Good day, comrade. In faith you sit there and see the whole world stretched below you. I am also on the road thither to try my luck. Have you a mind to go with me?" The giant looked contemptuously at the little tailor and said, "You vagabond, you miserable fellow." "That may be," replied the tailor, "but here you may read what sort of man I am." And, unbuttoning his coat, he showed the giant his belt. The giant read, "7 at one blow," and thinking they were men whom the tailor had slain, he conceived a little respect for him. Still he wished to prove him first, so taking up a stone, he squeezed it in his hand so that water dripped out of it. "Do that after me," said he to the other, "if you have any strength." "If it be nothing worse than that," said the tailor, "that's play to me." And diving into his pocket, he brought out the cheese and squeezed it till the whey ran out of it, and said, "Now I think that's a little better." The giant did not know what to say, and could not believe it of the little man. So taking up another stone, he threw it so high that one could scarcely see it with the eye, saying, "There, you mannikin, do that after me." "Well done," said the tailor, "but your stone must fall down again to the ground. I will throw one up which shall not come back." And dipping into his pocket, he took out the bird and threw it into the air. The bird, rejoicing in its freedom, flew straight up and then far away, and did not return. "How does that little affair please you, comrade?" asked the tailor. "You can throw well, certainly," replied the giant. "Now let us see if you are in trim to carry something out of the common." So saying, he led him to a huge oak tree, which lay upon the ground, and said, "If you are strong enough, just help me to carry this tree out of the forest." "With all my heart," replied the tailor. "Do you take the trunk upon your shoulder, and I will raise the boughs and branches which are the heaviest, and carry them." The giant took the trunk upon his shoulder, but the tailor placed himself on a branch, so that the giant, who was not able to look round, was forced to carry the whole tree, and the tailor besides. He, being behind, was very merry, and chuckled at the trick, and presently began to whistle the song. "There rode 3 tailors out at the gate," as if the carrying of trees were a child's play. The giant, after he had staggered along a short distance with his heavy burden, could go no further, and shouted out, "Do you hear? I must let the tree fall." The tailor, springing down, quickly embraced the tree with both arms, as if he had been carrying it, and said to the giant, "Are you such a big fellow, and yet cannot you carry this tree by yourself?" Then they journeyed on further, and as they came to a cherry tree, the giant seized the top of the tree, where the ripest fruits hung, and bending it down, gave it to the tailor to hold, bidding him eat. But the tailor was much too weak to hold the tree down, and when the giant let go, the tree flew up into the air, and the tailor was carried with it. He came down on the other side, however, without injury, and the giant said, "What does that mean? Have you not strength enough to hold that twig?" "My strength did not fail me," replied the tailor. "Do you suppose that was any hard thing for one who has killed 7 at one blow? I have sprung over the tree because the hunters were shooting below there in the thicket. Spring after me, if you can." The giant made the attempt, but could not clear the tree, and stuck fast in the branches, so that in this affair, too, the tailor was the better man. After this, the giant said, "Since you are such a valiant fellow, come with me to our house and stop a night with us." Hi, Connie. How you doing? Thank you for lurking. The tailor consented and followed him. And when they entered the cave, there sat by the fire 2 other giants, each having a roast sheep in his hand, of which he was eating. The tailor sat down, thinking, "This is much more like the world than is my workshop." And soon the giant showed him a bed where he might lie down and go to sleep. The bed, however, was too big for him, so he slipped out of it and crept into a corner. When midnight came, and the giant thought the tailor would be in a deep sleep, he got up, and taking a great iron bar, beat the bed right through at one stroke, and supposed he had thereby given the tailor his death blow. At the earliest dawn of morning, the giants went forth into the forest, and quite forgetting the tailor, when presently up he came, quite merry, and showed himself before them. The giants were terrified, and, fearing he would kill them all, they ran away in great haste. The tailor journeyed on, always following his nose, and after he had wandered some long distance, he came into the courtyard of a royal palace. And as he felt rather tired, he laid himself down on the grass and went to sleep. Whilst he lay there, the people came and viewed him on all sides, and read upon his belt, 7 at one blow. "Ah," said they, "what does this great warrior here in time of peace? This must be some mighty hero." So they went and told the king, thinking that, should war break out, here was an important and useful man whom one ought not to part with at any price. The king took counsel and sent one of his courtiers to the tailor to ask for his fighting services. If he should be awake, the messenger stopped at the sleeper's side and waited till he stretched out his limbs and opened his eyes. And then he laid before him his message. "Solely on that account did I come here," was the reply. "I am quite ready to enter into the king's service." Then he was conducted away with great honor, and a fine house was appointed him to dwell in. The courtiers, however, became jealous of the tailor, and wished he was 1,000 miles away. "What will happen?" said they one to one another. "If we go to battle with him, when he strikes out, 7 will fall at every blow, so that none of us will be left." In their rage they came to a resolution to resign, and they went all together to the king and asked his permission, saying, "We are not prepared to keep company with a man who kills 7 at one blow."
The king was grieved to lose all his faithful servants for the sake of one, and wished that he had never had seen the tailor, and would willingly have now been rid of him. He dared not, however, dismiss him, because he feared the tailor would kill him and all his subjects, and place himself upon the throne. For a long time he deliberated, till at last he came to a decision, and, sending for the tailor, he told him that seeing he was so great an hero, he wished to make a request of him. "In a certain forest in my kingdom," said the king, "there live two giants who, by murder, rapine, fire, and robbery, have committed great havoc, and no one dares to approach them without periling his own life. If you overcome and kill both these giants, I will give you my only daughter in marriage, and the half of my kingdom for a dowry. 100 knights shall accompany you, too, in order to render you assistance." "Ah, that is something for such a man as I," thought the tailor to himself. "A beautiful princess and half a kingdom are not offered to one every day." "Oh, yes," he replied, "I will soon manage these two giants, and 100 horsemen are not necessary for that purpose. He who kills 7 at one blow need not fear 2. Thus talking, the little tailor set out, followed by the 100 knights, to whom he said, as soon as they came to the borders of the forest, "Do you stay here. I would rather meet these giants alone." Then off he sprang into the forest, peering about him right and left, and after a while he saw the 2 giants lying asleep under a tree, snoring so loudly that the branches above them shook violently. The tailor, full of courage, filled both his pockets with stones and clambered up the tree. When he got to the middle of it, he crept along a bough, so that he sat just above the sleepers, and then he let fall one stone after another upon the breast of one of them. For some time the giant did not stir, until, at last awakening, he pushed his companion and said, "Why are you beating me?" "You are dreaming," he replied. "I never hit you." They laid themselves down again to sleep, and presently the tailor threw a stone down upon the other. "What was that?" he exclaimed. "What are you knocking me for?" "I did not touch you. You must dream," replied the first. In a little while they sank down again to sleep, and because they were very tired, they soon shut their eyes again. Then the tailor began his sport again, and, picking out the biggest stone, threw it with all his force upon the breast of the first giant. "That is too bad," he exclaimed, and springing up like a madman, he fell upon his companion, who, reckoning with equal measure, they set to in such good earnest that they rooted up trees and beat one another until they both fell dead upon the ground. Now the tailor jumped down, saying, "What a piece of luck! They did not uproot the tree on which I sat, or else I must have jumped upon another like a squirrel, for I am not given to flying." Then he drew his sword, and, cutting a deep wound in the breast of each, he went to the horseman and said, "The deed is done. I have given each his death stroke. But it was a hard job, for in their necessity they have uprooted trees to defend themselves with. Still, all that is no use when such as one as I come, who kills 7 at every stroke."
"Are you not wounded, then?" asked they. "That is not to be expected. They have not touched a hair on my head," replied the little man. The knights could scarcely believe him, and so, riding away into the forest, they found the giants lying in their blood and the uprooted trees around them. Now the tailor desired his promised reward of the king, but he repented of that promise and began to think of some new scheme to get rid of the hero. "Before you receive my daughter and the half of my kingdom," he said to him, "you must perform one other heroic deed. In the forest there runs a wild unicorn, which commits great havoc, and whom you must first of all catch. I still fear less for an unicorn than I do for 2 giants. 7 at one blow, that is my motto," said the tailor. Then he took with him a rope and an axe, and went away to the forest, bidding those who were ordered to accompany him to wait on the outskirts. He had not to search long, for presently the unicorn came near and prepared to rush at him, as if he would pierce him on the spot. "Softly, softly," he exclaimed. "That is not done so easily." And, waiting till the animal was close upon him, he sprang limbly behind a tree. The unicorn, rushing with all its force against the tree, fixed its horn so fast in the trunk that it could not draw it out again, and so it was made prisoner. "Now I have got my bird," said the tailor, and, coming from behind the tree, he first bound the rope around his neck, and then, cutting the horn out of the tree with his axe, he put all in order, and, leading the animal, brought it before the king. Listen, this unicorn is just going to be held in the sea for a little bit with a bunch of its own kind. Just because a giant red bull harasses them and makes certain that they don't get out doesn't mean it's a bad existence. The king, however, would not yet deliver up the promised reward, and making a third request, that before the wedding the tailor should catch a wild boar, which did much injury, and he should have the huntsman to help him. "With pleasure," was the reply. "It is mere child's play." The huntsman, however, he left behind, and they were overjoyed to be there, for this wild boar had already so often hunted them that they had no pleasure in hunting it. As soon as the boar perceived the tailor, it ran at him with gaping mouth and glistening teeth, and tried to throw him on the ground. But our flying hero sprang into a little chapel which was near, and out again at a window on the other side in a trice. The boar ran after him, but he, skipping round, shut the door behind it, and there was the raging beast was caught, for it was much too unwieldy and heavy to jump out the window. The tailor now called the huntsmen up, that they might see his prisoner with their own eyes, but our hero presented himself before the king, who was compelled now, whether he would or no, to keep his promise and surrender his daughter and the half of his kingdom. Had he known that it was no warrior, but only a tailor who stood before him, it would have gone to his heart still more. So the wedding was celebrated with great splendor,
though with little rejoicing, and out of a tailor was made a king. Some little while afterwards, the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep, and saying, "Boy, make me a waistcoat, and stitch up these trousers, or I will lay the yard measure over your ears." Then she remembered of what condition her lord was, and complained in the morning to her father, and begged he would deliver her from her husband, who was nothing else than a tailor. The king comforted her by saying, "This night leave your chamber door open. My servants shall stand without, and when he is asleep they shall enter, bind him, and bear him away to a ship which shall carry him forth into the wide world. The wife was contented with this proposal, but the king's armor-bearer, who had overheard all, went to the young king and disclosed the whole plot. "I will shoot a bolt upon this affair," said the brave tailor. In the evening, at their usual time, they went to bed, and when his wife believed he slept, she got up, opened the door, and laid herself down again. The tailor, however, feigned to be asleep, and began to exclaim in a loud voice, "Boy, make me this waistcoat, and stitch up these trousers, or I will beat the yard measure about your ears. 7 have I killed with one blow. 2 giants have I slain. A unicorn have I led captive, and a wild boar have I caught. And shall I be afraid of those who stand without my chamber?" When these men heard these words spoken by the tailor, a great fear overcame them, and they ran away as if the wild huntsman were behind them. Neither afterwards durst any man venture to oppose him. Thus became the tailor a king, and so he remained the rest of his days. Thus ends the valiant little tailor, who has slain 7 with one blow. Yeah, I'm sure she was totally, excited that, she got some guy with massively calloused hands. Or at least calloused fingers from all the tailoring. But yeah, always fulfill 3 requests. Once it goes past then obviously they've broken the cycle, and you don't have to do the 4th thing. This next story.
Look, out there in the audience. People!
Arctic Blade Turtle, thank you for the follow. Thank you for following. I thought I had that alert off. But I do love hearing it, though. That is definitely my favorite alert. This next title is entitled The Straw, the Coal, and the Beam.